Hello everybody, I'm working on a small standing desk, and in this episode I want to take these lower rails that I cut bridle joints into last time and join them into the back legs like so, and plane up the upper sides, the upper rails, and do the same thing with those up here. And if we have a look at the drawing, the rails that I'm talking about is this piece and this one. When someone is using the desk and is leaning on this front edge, that's going to put a lot of strain on this joint, and that as this part wants to flex, that also puts a lot of strain on that joint as well. So as a rail wants to rotate downwards, that is trying to pull this joint apart. If you imagine, for example, a mortise and tenon like so, if I rotate this piece, that is attempting to pull the tenon out of the mortise. So I need something extremely strong here and here. I think the best choice will be a wedged through mortise and tenon. So that's the upper rails done, and now I need to do the same thing on the lower rails. But here I have a little bit of extra length, so I'm going to use a Pulseller's trick. So this is my shoulder, this is how long the tenon is going to be, and this is my extra length that is going to get cut off. But instead of cutting that off first and then making the tenon, I'm going to leave that there and make two cuts here and treat it exactly like I did the bridle joint. That way I have support for the router plane on both sides, and it's a lot easier to get a very nice and smooth tenon. I'm not sure actually if this takes any longer time than sawing the cheeks the standard way. It would be interesting to actually measure and see which way is faster, but it's definitely more accurate. So I think when you have that extra bit of length, it is probably worth doing. So that's my tenons. Let's start with the upper rails because they are a bit easier to locate. I know what height the tabletop is supposed to sit at, which is right there. And I know the thickness of the tabletop. At least I know the thickness that I'm aiming for. It might end up needing to be a millimeter or two thinner, but that should be fine. So there is the top. There is the underside of the top, and since the top is going to sit on the rails and the tenon comes all the way to the top of the rail, that is simply the top of my mortise. And that is the length of my mortise. I'm gonna transfer the upper of those lines to the other leg, but not the lower, because these two tenons are not exactly the same height. So I need to make sure I get the correct length for the mortise there. And then I need to locate the position for the lower rails as well. Again, I know the height of the shelf right there, and I know the thickness of the shelf. But that is not the start of my mortise, because I did make a small upper shoulder. So now I need to bring that line all the way out to the corner there, so that I can position the rail up against the line. And now I can make a little mark on each side of that tenon. And now I have the length for that mortise as well. Then I'm going to transfer neither of those two lines. Instead, I'm going to transfer this pencil line that marks the top of the rail. Position my rail at that line and make little marks around the tenon. I'm actually not referencing my reference sides with a square right now, which is not ideal, of course. My reference sides are facing inwards, and I want the legs clamped together so that I can transfer lines between them. But it should be fine. They are very, very close to parallel, these sides, so there should be absolutely no discrepancy over such a short distance. So now I have my locations for all 4 mortises. Let's scribe their thicknesses with a mortise gauge, and then we can start cutting. Alright, I could not resist dry fitting everything I have done up to this point. It is so exciting when it starts to become a 3-dimensional shape that can actually stand up. The front legs are not cut to length yet, so it's going to sit a little bit lower. I think it's going to be a very comfortable height actually. But let's have a look at the back. So the tenons are passing all the way through the legs. This is a pretty solid joint as it is, but I want to put wedges in those curves that I made in the tenon to make it flare out and lock it in place forever. And to do that I need to cut a corresponding flaring shape in the mortise. So I'm gonna take these apart again and then scribe my angles and make those cuts. So I need to transfer the length of the mortise out to the edges, and I don't think this is the kind of thing that requires marking knife accuracy. The pencil line is going to be fine, and I have this set to 5 degrees, which is not very much, but I think it's going to be enough. So that is the shape that the mortise is going to have, and therefore also the tenon after the wedges are in. So when I now extend those lines up to the back opening of the mortise, that's where I need to come in and create that slope. So I'm going to cut that angle with the same mortise chisel, freshly sharpened, because you need a good edge for this. To help me, I've made this block. It has one end cut to the 5-degree angle that I need. It's totally possible to do this without a block like this. Just, eyeball that angle following the pencil line. I've done that before, it works fine. But with a block that takes care of one of these angles, I'm free to focus on getting this angle right. It just takes one thing out of the equation. It needs to be clamped down really tight, otherwise it's going to move backwards. And make sure that it's aligned in this dimension as well. So the mortises are flared out, and as you can see, that now allows the tenon to open up. So I need a few wedges. This is not decorative wedges, they're going to be facing the wall, all of them. I'm doing this joint purely for structural reasons, so I'm not going with a contrasting wood, just an offcut. And I want these wedges to match the 5-degree angle. And here are my wedges. I made a few extra in case I break some when inserting them. They fit into the curves like so. And spread out the mortise, and with glue there, that is going to be just as solid as a single piece of wood. But I'm not going to assemble it yet, and there is quite a few more steps I need to do before it's time for glue up. So that's where I'm going to call it an episode. 4 through wedged mortise and tenon joints are cut, and we have had the first look at the assembled structure. So it's starting to take shape. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.